Hey, Evan here. In the last two videos, we were going in depth with how I use my new scale worksheets with my students. And if you haven't seen those videos, there'll be links in the description. I definitely recommend watching those before continuing on with this video. By now, you should know the first octave of the Ionian mode pretty well, and should be getting more comfortable with playing it from low E to high E. And you may also have been introducing the first octave and the first window of the Dorian mode. Let's keep expanding our scales across the fretboard. We can do that very similarly to how we did that in the last video. So we can take Dorian and we can just start working on it from low E to high E, and that will look like this. And again, you would practice this very similarly to how you've been practicing the Ionian mode from low E to high E. Another thing that you can do to expand the scale across the fretboard is introduce another mode shape. And this is what we'll be focusing more on in this video. So the next mode shape is Phrygian. This is the third mode in the major scale, and so we're going to place that on the third note of the key of G. So that would be B. As we did with Ionian and Dorian, you can introduce that first octave, which sounds like this. And you can also just introduce that first window, which would sound like this. So let's add that onto the exercise that we did at the end of the last video. I'll review that really quick, and then we're going to add in the Phrygian window to that. Now let's add that Phrygian window in. So when I go up from Ionian to Dorian, instead of going back, I'm just going to now add in my new window. And get used to that in an ascending fashion, because we're adding in something new, so it might be difficult to just immediately go right back down. But once you start getting comfortable with that, then add it in descending as well. Now, once you've added the Phrygian window into that exercise, you could just keep adding in more windows. We can add in Lydian, we can add in Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, and just work our way up the fretboard on just those first two strings. This, I think, is a really good exercise because it gives you a glimpse into each one of the mode shapes, and you're beginning to learn how each one of them starts. This practice is something that I use in conjunction with going from low E to high E in each one of the mode shapes. So let's say I just introduced the Phrygian window and I'm working on Dorian from low to high E. I might do a couple rounds of playing Dorian all the way up and then all the way back down. And then I might start doing the little window practice. And doing it at a pace that's challenging to you, but you're also not making a lot of mistakes. Again, using that metronome. The metronome is super duper helpful with keeping you nice and consistent. And now if I started adding in that Lydian window, I might just keep going while I'm learning that Dorian shape. And then I might say, okay, I'm getting really comfortable with the Dorian shape. Now let's start adding in the Phrygian shape from low E to high E. And this is when you start seeing something that's really cool. This is something I honestly didn't notice until I was teaching for a couple of months and I was showing students these scales and I was starting to learn some new ones of my own just to challenge myself. And I saw that those windows actually start repeating and rotating around the scale. So let's look at Phrygian closer. You can see we start with the purple notes inside of the Phrygian window, and once we play through those, we go into the red notes, which, as we remember, is the Dorian window. So that's something that we're already working on and should be more familiar with. And then we continue on and we see, hey, the Ionian window has shown up. And that one we're definitely more comfortable with. So as we're moving from low E to high E, those windows are actually moving backwards to windows that we already know. So as we move up, it's like becoming a review each time. And it's further setting in the mode shapes that we're already working on, making them more familiar and making it so that it's just way easier to learn these shapes. Because Phrygian seemed like, hey, it was a totally new set of notes that we had to learn. But then you go to the next one and you say, oh, wait, I already know these. And then I already know that window too. So I really only needed to learn 6 new notes in this new window shape. And then after that, it's just finding where the shifts happen, because the B string definitely makes our scale shapes shift up a little bit. But once you found that, then you just have this shape that you're already getting way more comfortable with. It's pretty awesome. So if we were to introduce the Lydian mode right now, really it's just that first window that would be the most unclear, because underneath you have the Phrygian mode and then the Dorian mode showing up, which by now should almost be like review. But I think the best thing about this is that by the time you get up to that Locrian mode, if we were just practicing this from low E to high E, by the time you get up there, you may have totally forgotten what the Ionian mode was, because you're spending so much time focusing on all of that, and it's a lot of information. But these windows really help keep it concise and helps keep this information concrete, because you're reviewing it every time that you go up one of the shapes. So again, you get up to that Locrian shape, you still know Ionian, and you actually know it probably better than you did before, because it's just repeating all over the place. It's just constant review with one small thing that is a new piece of information. Now, I've known these major scale shapes for many years, at least 10, and watching me do these exercises might not really show how well this really works. And honestly, I didn't notice these windows were rotating until I was learning a completely different scale than the major scale. And I used this, and it helped me memorize that shape way faster than it took me to get down the major scales. So I'm going to show you how I use these exercises to practice scales that are nowhere near as familiar to me as the major scale. I won't be going into a lot of detail in this video with the scale that I'm using, though I am using the harmonic minor scale, which is one of the scale worksheets that I have available. So as I've shown you in this video series, I'm going to learn that first octave of the first mode. That's the first thing I do. Then once I get comfortable with that, I'm going to start learning it from low E to high E. And there's still a lot of thinking that's going involved for me. I'm really focusing in on, I want to make this shape right. I'm looking at the scale worksheet while I'm practicing that to make sure that I get those shapes right. And I'm also listening to make sure that it sounds correct as well. Now I would introduce the next mode shape. So now I have this shape. I would learn that first octave, as well as just keeping it to that first mode window, and then doing that practice that is just going up the windows. I would start with those first 2, and then I would continue to add on more to that exercise as I'm learning more of the shapes. And this wraps up the video series on how I use these scale worksheets with my students and in my own practice. If you enjoyed the lessons in this video series and would be interested in taking lessons with me, I do offer online lessons that we can do via Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, Google Hangouts, really any of the free video services. I'll have a link in the description to my website for pricing options, and you can email me at hoppermusicworks@gmail.com with any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment below and let me know what you'd like to see next.